Alrighty, thank you everyone for joining this live stream. Today we have with us, you shouldn't be a stranger again. You're no longer a stranger. You came on a pre-recorded edition and you just killed it. The kind of feedback we've been getting and the views that the video has gathered has been very encouraging for a new channel like ours. And we thank you for joining us today. Welcome everyone to If You Asked Jimmy. We are having a guest today. We have, communicated. How did we advertise? What did we do? Yeah, but we have put the notice out there for a while so that we can engage. This channel is not supposed to be a monologue. It's actually a channel for the development and growth of our community. And we want not just to hear the view of Jimmy himself, but other people. Knowledge is not, what is it now? I want to interpret Yoruba to English. That no one has a monopoly of knowledge. I want to say that.
Yep.
And that's why we are bringing people from time to time. And our first guest on this our maiden live stream edition, yay, is no other than Mr. Ademola Dayo. He is based in the United Kingdom, while I am speaking to us from the United States. Mr. Ade, can I call you that?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Please, you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ademola Dayo, and you're a brother to me, so I don't need much of an introduction, but I am based in the UK, and I've been in the UK for a long while now, and for a few decades, shall I say.
Few decades? How many?
3, I'll say about roughly 3 decades. And I'm an IT professional, as you know, and I do a lot of, I do have interest in a lot of other areas like philosophy, business, and I do some charity work in Africa.
Awesome. I'm having some little static. I'm experiencing some little static. JK, am I cracking? I can hear static when Mr. Ade was feeding me back. Okay, you can put it in the chats. Yeah, I've closed every other window. So, welcome everyone. Let's dive straight, Mr. Ade, into the matter. In our recent conversation, there's something you mentioned about, the fact that you are not comfortable people using the terminology typical Nigeria. Why so?
That's a good question, because and it's a good way to start. We have, all right, this is my take on that. I do apologize that it may be a little bit beyond what you expect to get as a response, but it's my own understanding that we've gone through so much as a race. That we've now arrived at a place where we do not value our history, we don't value our heritage, we value where we are, and we're trying to develop that where we are with no heritage, no history. Well, should I say erased history? Because it's not that we don't have history. We've just managed. Yes. We've blanked out our history, we've blanked out our heritage. We're now looking at there was a word you mentioned last week or some other time that we was talking. You said that Artley Master. We're now looking at our Artley Master for approval. So this is why we do a lot of things. And one of them is the question you've asked, that I feel like we are now in a place where we say typical Nigerian or typical African man in a derogatory manner.
And you don't appreciate that. I think that's what you're talking about.
We don't appreciate, I don't appreciate it. Nobody should definitely be expressed, called that. Nobody should be referred to as that. And nobody should be even using that as a phrase. I'm a typical, that should be seen in a positive light. That, I'm a typical African man, or I'm a typical African woman. But it's not the case when we're using that phrase. Right. We use it as a negative remark.
Thank you.
Which is wrong.
Yeah, I see your point that it connotes negative. It has negative connotation. Every time people use that phrase, typical Nigerian, it is to illustrate or accentuate something that is definitely negative. You can know you know what to expect. Thank you very much for breaking. And I hope that because this channel is supposed to help us not just to have conversations, but actually to learn, to grow, and to live better in a dynamic and rapidly changing world. So I hope people will not. Sometimes we do things unconsciously. I just hope that people will be aware that it is not helping us in any way. And and we should desist from using that terminology, because we need to be a better people. Recently, because you are in diaspora, I'm going to ask you some questions. I did not probe I did not probe you a little bit. I asked you to introduce yourself. Okay, let me spend a minute or two to dig out more from you concerning that. So you've been in the UK, you said, for a couple of decades, like 3 decades, that's like 30 years.
Yes.
My question to you would be, you came to UK, or you have any history with UK before you returned, you now came back to UK or something?
Well, I was a teenager when I arrived in the UK, and
I'm driving at, do you have any heritage with UK even before you came as a teenager?
Well, my parents studied here, so I'm part of the generation that was born here.
You were born in the UK?
Yeah, was moved back to Nigeria after my parents finished their studies, along with a lot of my cousins. And then I came back as a teenager by myself, and tried to settle and fit into the system. And then start adulthood. My journey of adulthood in the UK. So it's been an interesting one, because I keep dabbling, and the fact that I spent a lot of time in Nigeria, I spent my secondary school days in Nigeria, I keep dabbling between Nigeria and UK, because most of my friends are in Nigeria and I'm based in the UK. So I try to still maintain that link and go back and forth as much as possible. But when you're a student and there's no internet in those days, you only rely on maybe telephone. I think I called one of my friends so many times. The mom actually starts asking that, does this guy have a job?
That's a nice way to drive it home. Because you are in diaspora, some of the questions might be diaspora centric, but I know that, like what you just told us, that you were born in the UK, you were taken back as a child to Nigeria by your parents, and you came back by yourself as a teenager, and you have been in the UK for like 3 decades. You are an IT professional, and you're someone that's passionate about your Nigeria and Africa, you know, and the place of Africa, you know, in the global scheme of things. So to that extent, I want to ask that, because we're going to touch on a lot of areas. Recently, there was a change of government in America where President Donald Trump took over as the new president. And, you know, it brought out a lot of presidential orders. One of them affects people who are not documented, you know, in America. We know that a lot of Nigerians are in the United Kingdom. So there was a video I saw of a Nigerian who came out and said other communities are rising up to support their people, but Nigeria is yet to see, you know, the Nigerians galvanizing around making sure that our people do not suffer undue hardship, you know, untold hardship. From your perspective, did he say it well, or what do you see of that? What do you say to that? That our people, maybe they are known for other things like partying and flexing and showing off, but they don't rise to support one another. What's your opinion? Does it happen in the UK as well?
Absolutely, and it's the same thing. It permutates across everywhere we go, even back home, where we may think we are very helpful back home, but we're not. We are only helpful to our immediate relatives or extended relatives. We don't look at strangers and listen to strangers and try to. And there's a trend going on that people actually video themselves feeding the needies in some part of the world, which then beg to ask that, okay, why are you doing that? Why are you actually videoing what you're doing if this is something you automatically do regardless? So a lot of things are done for the likes and the views, as opposed to tapping into the humanity aspect of us. So I feel like it's a good time to call that out. We don't do anything at all supporting one another abroad. We don't do anything at all at home. That's why our society is how it is today. We've lost our core as people. We don't really have a core belief.
Yeah, in one of our conversations, you said that people party hard because they work hard, but they do not do business together. How valid is that they do not do big things together like other people of other places and other cultures abroad?
It's not. It's very valid.
Do you want to?
Oh, definitely. I'll expatiate, because culturally we're not like that. We're not the kind of a race that sits together and plan together and then trust one another to the point where I don't need to see the detail. You don't need to come back to me every day or every week. And you don't need to come and polish my shoe at home. You don't need to wash my car because I've invested in your business. We can just see those are the kind of things, the toxic behavior that a lot of us have acquired over decades, or should I say centuries, of being shifted from pillar to post when it comes to the kind of grounding we should have. Our forefathers were very different. They help one another the way they ought to help one another at the time. Obviously, in those days, that things were much harder. So there are so many schemes. For example, as farmers, I remember I was watching, I can't remember what it's called now in Yoruba land, but a farmer would have a group of farmers, and on one day they will go to one person's farm.
Arrow or where?
Exactly. So one day they will go to one person's farm, they will help him maybe to plant. The next day they will go to the next person's farm, because they couldn't afford laborers or people that will actually help them toil the land. That makes it easier for them to do what they need to do very quickly.
Living.
Yeah. So we've lost that along the line of being westernized. By the way, we still need to really assess the fact that we are westernized as people, but we're not. Well, we were civilized in those days, but we've shifted from being civilized to being westernized now, and that's really harmed us and harmed our relationship with one another. As a community, things are broken down badly, and we see that here. We see that here, that people are raised individually. Right. If I didn't have my Nigerian antecedent or African antecedent, I would be happy to just do whatever I need to do with my family and leave it there. Any other interruption it will be unwanted.
Amazing.
Because that is the system designed here. Amazing. So we can understand why people will be like that, because the system that they've been trained within, the framework they've been given, is definitely of that such.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Ade. I know that you are loaded and you have a lot to dish out to us, but I want to squeeze you and make sure that we get as much as possible out of you in this conversation. What has but a short time? Maybe someday we will do live shows that will extend, but we are using this as the first, as the maiden edition. And that takes me to the point that I know you, and part of the reasons you are our first guest is your passion for Nigeria. Yeah. I know you're totally passionate about Africa and motherland. Now, there are a lot of narratives out there about Nigeria, and even not from other people, but from Nigerians themselves. Some people say they are never going back to that country. Sometimes some people will travel, maybe they will just cross over to the abroad.
Yes, yes.
Everything they say about Nigeria is negative. We all know the problems of our country.
Of course.
But, what do you see to the kind of narratives that our people actually propagate? I know they have a right to be angry about how things are at home. But what's your perception? That question is going to be in two parts. people who say they are never going to return back there, and people who say those people in Nigeria, finger pointing and just like, blame shaming or, or feeling that superiority complex.
Yeah.
I don't want the question to be too long. Did you get the narratives, negative narratives, and whether to go back or not to go back?
So yeah, so which one should I answer first?
as your lordship pleases.
So I think when it comes to whether to go back or not to go back, is an individual thing, and I think we touched on that the first time we spoke, and a lot of people are at a situation where they're at the crossroads. They've sold everything they had. The things went from really great to terrible based on the economical situation of the country, and their businesses went down the drain, and they've managed to find a new career, a greener pasture elsewhere, and they've moved themselves and their family. That kind of experience would not. He may be saying, okay, I would like to go back eventually, but if he says, okay, I'm not going back, it's a personal choice. And you can't really blame that person because they've experienced a lot. The reason why I have the view I have is because I never had to work in Nigeria full time. I never had to. So I still had that view, that was that lens that's not as tainted as such person. If you're a 40-year-old man that's done a lot of work, been in traffic from mainland to VI, you've done that for 10 years. I've not done that. I've not experienced that. So I don't have any. I've not been on Third Mainland Bridge for more than 30 minutes in my entire trip. Wow. Back and forth.
I see.
So I wouldn't be able to judge that person. But personally, from my own perspective, I still feel going back home is the only way for us to develop home. The only way we can then start enlightening people at home. There's a recent thing that people are now picking on, the process of this Oba, the King Alafin that was recently appointed, and people now started insinuating that the Ifa usually picked from abroad, which is interesting. But again, if we had to look at it from a point of view, if someone that's left Nigeria, let's use myself as an example. If I am to be compared or to be assessed, let's use the word assessed. If I am to be assessed with someone that has spent all their career, the same job, the same journey in Nigeria, who would you think have encountered danger, hardship, all sort of trials? Obviously, the person in Nigeria will have experienced more of that. But at the same time, the person in Nigeria, because it's an harsh environment, is likely to have caused their driver, abused their driver, maltreated their driver, maltreated their house help, because that's the environment. If you're too soft, you get, well, the loudest is the only one that gets hard, as they say. So when you assess people, and you assess them based on their merit, based on their personality, it's likely you will actually vote for the one that the society has conditioned to be a better person.
Wow.
Even though they are of the same character, but the society has influenced and conditioned someone to actually do better. So I may have that tendency, but there's nowhere here, even if I have a driver in the United Kingdom, if I slap the driver, I may end up in having rice and toast for a while.
That's true. So you don't have anything against people who want to return to Nigeria, and you don't appreciate people talking down on Nigeria. It's just the experiences, individual experiences, right? So that takes me